Okay, we're recording. Hey everyone, I'm fired up for today. Hey Faye, great to have you on. So we've set things up for a few webinars, and today I'm calling this the sledgehammer. I'm going to give you a lot of my job today is to try to help you to start to connect the dots with the main kind of technical, what do we call it? I'll go to the slide in a minute. Hey Brent and Brian, great to have you on. So in one sense, it's a simple concept, so it's easy to explain, but I have a job that's harder, or that I at least don't yet know how to do perfectly, but I'm always working on it, which is really making the case for what I'm showing you, and not just explaining what it is, but then helping you see why it's so critical to use it. Basically, why it's important, right? Our sense of importance, especially with regarding this kind of stuff, tends to be far off. Of course, you guys who are here on live, or even should be listening and so forth, obviously, you're the ones where this feels particularly important in the first place. But still, I try to do a good job of that. All right. So what I want to show you is that there is an obvious kind of truth, right? That it's not like it's controversial, or it might not seem insightful at first. But what is going to be insightful and fascinating is how outside the box, how much our thinking by default normally absolutely violates and contradicts this at its core on every level and so forth. So the sledgehammer is going to be, and I'm talking about now, still continuing with the boxes, right? Perspectives and thinking. And because when we're trying to make money, I have it right on the screen, but I'll get to it in a second. When we're trying to make money, we need to have a breakthrough regarding 1 to 3 of a product that people are going to pay enough money for. Enough people are going to pay enough money for us to win, right? To hit our target, to get over our bar or threshold for the money we need for our lives, right? Roughly $3 to $5 million, right? Or 2 to 5, let's say. We need to get over the bar with getting new relationships, new leads, right? New prospects. And we need to get over the bar with converting them, getting them to decide to become a customer, to pay us money. And of course, as I said, we have to be able to fulfill. And so obviously, if we haven't achieved that yet, then it's a matter of thinking and acting, right? But it's generally what's going to be the case is that just letting what we're already doing play out over some more time isn't necessarily going to cut it, right? We're going to want to have 1 or more breakthroughs in order to get to that money that we need. And then, of course, and with the same meta strategies that allow us to do that are the same ones that are going to lead to success and happiness in any other area of our lives too. So the only drawback is that it's not like I'm saying, here's the 6 steps or 12 steps or whatever. Here's the instructions to do this special money-making technique, right? We basically have that already anyway, in pretty much the best thing going on, right? With Google SEO and related activities, consulting and such with that. But this is the other part of it, and it's very effective. It's very reliable. The only thing it might be is less fast than if we could just be given the exact recipe. We just go out and follow without really having to think outside the box hardly at all, and just go follow it and make millions of dollars. But that's generally tough to do, although we come pretty close to LMG. But so it comes down to our thinking meta strategy. And it's really going to be less about needing to have brilliant ideas. Our mind's going to do that on its own. A lot of this is we're going to try to clear out block, right? And so this sledgehammer now, where we're really honing in this webinar and beyond on how to know what's true. And when I talk about that, I'm not like talking about how to know what's true regarding like government conspiracies, right? Or whatever configuration of the world, right? How to know what's true, whether the person I'm dating really loves me or not, right? Now, what we can do with any of those things is to set ourselves up where we don't have contradictions and screwed up ideas in our own head. And then that's going to give us the best chance to get things right with just more specific issues in life. So it's still very helpful, but what it's going to turn out is we're going to want to be using this sledgehammer and what I'll be talking about from here on out to integrate our own mind. Most everyone at some point or continuously has a sense, I want better control over my own mind, right? I want to control my mind. some form of that occur, like is what pretty much everyone feels, I think, in some way, shape, or form, right? Either intermittently or continuously. Maybe someone doesn't think that if they fully don't realize that their mind plays a part in their life at all, and they just think entirely that their environment, the environment being configured the way they want, is what is the only thing that exists, right? So someone that's particularly, I don't know, shallow minded or blinded in that way, where they literally have no sense of their own mind being relevant to their life, might not. But the moment when we realize that our mind plays some role, right? And we all want the world to be the way we want it to be, configured the way we want, people to act the way we want, and the economy to be good, people to say yes to our sales pitch, buy our stuff, right? Be nice to us. That's like having the outside world conform to the way we want. We want that to some degree. I want that, right? But then to a greater or lesser degree, people get a sense of that their own mind is involved in things. And then people come to some sort of conclusion that's phrased, I want to control my mind better. What it's going to turn out is it's not really going to be about controlling our mind. What we more want to do is have less conflict in our mind between our mind and itself and between our mind and the world, like the environment. And that's going to come down to integrating things mentally, having our feelings match up with each other, have our feelings match with what we want them to be. We want to feel like doing what we have to do. What's interesting to realize as well is that, it's very related, is that when you look at what you fear, not in terms of crippling fear, but we live with this sort of thing hanging over our head a lot. Oh crap, if such and such happens, or if I don't accomplish such and such, then I'm not going to like how my own mind feels about it, right? If I have to go to the dentist, I'm not going to like how I feel about that. If I get an audit, I'm not going to like how I feel about that. If I have to do this job over again because of some reason, then I'm not going to like how I feel about that, right? So we in kind of somewhere between the back and the front of our minds, like in the middle of our mind, is the sort of thing that we're constantly dealing with if we know to look for it, right? Or if we're honest with ourselves, is we're afraid of our own feelings about various tasks and events happening and so forth, right? And which is related to what I'm talking about. We're afraid that our own mental integration with our own mind and then the world as it really is or turns out to be is not going to match up. It's not going to integrate, right? There's going to be a conflict there. And we're afraid of that. And that fear dictates a lot of how we're steering ourselves in life, if you look for it. So this sledgehammer is going to be really big for getting our mind integrated with itself and then adapting then better to outside world and such. All right. So what I'm talking about, then this is going to take a little bit of explanation, but on the face of it, it's simple and it never really changes from being simple. You're just going to need to explain anyway, basically. But because what's fascinating is that in practice, people just absolutely just contradict it. Okay. So what I wrote here, and there are different angles on this, but the way I phrased it is, if it changes, it isn't the same thing. So if something changes, it is not the same thing. In another way to put it, there's no such thing as saying something changed, right? A related term is if something does not change, if there's no difference, and it can come up with something gets renamed, right? I use the example of extortion and taxation, right? If extortion is evil, and all of us basically believe it is, if we get a note from the mafia saying you owe $50,000 or we're going to cut your legs off at the knees and pull out your teeth, and that was very real, if it wasn't like a joke, if you knew that was really the case, then it would be like, you'd probably physically feel like a horrible blow to the stomach, right? And you'd probably be trembling and dealing with it, or whatever amount of money is would be tough for you. But for most of us, that might be it. So that's extortion, right? Or if we think about doing it to our neighbor, if our neighbor's been working 3 jobs to pay for some difficult medical treatment for his wife, and if we go over there and say, you've been making too much money, I want half of it, or I'm going to shoot you in the kneecap, then that's just obviously evil, right? And beyond evil, not controversial. If we rename the exact same action into taxation, that's just an example of where I'm saying if it doesn't change, then it is the same, right? Regardless if you rename it. And similarly, relevant to your business life, for example, when it comes to like plan A, right? You'll come up with some plan that you're following for some subtopic in your business, some something small or large, kind of big picture, middle picture, small picture, you'll have a plan that may be very explicit. It may be somewhat implicit, but you have a plan. And people will act as if the plan changed all the time. They'll just start acting on some sort of different plan or that something else is a priority when really nothing changed. Something changed like on the surface. That's not, when I say nothing relevant changed, nothing about that thing itself changed. Window dressing might have changed, right? Like renaming extortion to taxation. Something changed. The word changed and the window dressing changed. Government's involved, right? So that's supposed to make it okay. It's supposed to convert, government's supposed to be able to convert something from terribly immoral to something totally fine and desirable. So that must mean, in that case, the government has the ability to do that. There must be such an entity that can do that. Turns out there is no such entity. Therefore, that the thing doesn't exist. But anyhow, but that illustrates this idea of if nothing changes, which is not what I've written here. It's a related phrase, right? It may or may not be the opposite, but or the inverse or converse. I don't want to confuse you with terms like that. But related, if it doesn't change, if nothing relevant to the actual thing changes, if it's just window dressing or nothing, then it's the same thing. So if nothing relevant happens to change your plan A or your priorities, but then you act as if you have a different priority, then you're not mentally integrated in a way that's just purely unhelpful. It's purely an error. It's like noise or blurriness that purely screws you up. But people do this generally nonstop, right? Their priorities will change, but nothing really, nothing. The thing that matters didn't change, shouldn't be changing. But then they'll act as if there's a different plan or different priority without being explicit about it or just basically incorrectly because nothing relevant to that thing changed. Now, the reason I'm actually calling this a sledgehammer is I want to point out to you, I've referred to this before, but I want to get it through today, like big time. Normally, people think that all of their words, like basically all their thoughts and their words and their ideas about the world, but their words refer to stuff that also changes, right? Fido, right? The dog. They themselves, people have a worldview where Fido, the word refers to this physical object that moves around, sheds fur, molecules in the body change, right? And all kinds of molecules are always moving. Or the universe, right? The universe in people's view changes, and yet they use the same word. People, right? The word that refers to various people and concepts, basically anything. Their view of, they think that their words refer to objects and relationships between objects in the outside world. And they also believe that those objects change. So the words refer to something that also changes. That wobble, right, causes just nonstop problems every minute, all the time, constantly, right? A big example overall is like the way people change what they mean by themselves, their identity. They'll identify with a tribe or they'll identify other people as a group. And so one member of a group, but the group is just in a person's mind. So I live in America. I decide that there's a group of people I call Japanese. And then some of the members of that group do something to attack members of a group I self-identify with, Americans. And now we can burn little Japanese babies alive and we're justified. And it's even a good idea. And we cheer for it, right? So messing around with the meaning of the word basically me, right? Because people will say, or we, like we were attacked, they attacked me, the meaning changes. So our words are always changing. What we need to do is have an understanding of what words refer to, the objects of our thought that has the capacity not to change. And if and when you do that, and I'll try to start walking you through that today. If you can do that, you'll be on a plane nearly by yourself, right? Maybe some other people on it following LOI and so forth. But as you come to understand this idea, see how it gets applied, see how it gets violated, then among many other things, right? One of the things that's going to really clear you out to make money is an additional sense of not being intimidated by other people. There's kind of a hard to spot overall sense of intimidation that we tend to have, that someone has to have thought of this idea or someone's doing it or there's competition that's relevant to something, right? And there's a way that we can give lip service to, oh, I don't know. And this isn't my point. I'm not actually claiming that people are stupid or not, but there's a way that people really screw up something critical with thinking, however, right? There's a way that we don't think and act as if that's really the case. Right. And certainly the way that nearly everyone assigns, people have a view and relationship with government that I talk about it a lot because it's really people's religion. They don't really think of it that way. But regardless of what religion people think that they ascribe to, they really assign godlike a godlikeness to government, right? Remember, people literally, the minute you believe that any taxation at any amount at any time is okay, 1% taxation, you're assigning the power to government to legitimize a horribly evil act. And just by waving the magic wand of government, right? And there can't be anything else. When people try to say it's the greater good, no, because if I extort my neighbor, then that act doesn't change because I spend some of that money on helping to build a road. No matter how I spend that money, the act is evil. And we all would typically agree with it, right? Maybe there could be some people are so crazy that who knows, right? A lot of cases. But if I just go over to my neighbor and threaten to shoot them in the kneecap or lock them and their wife in my basement for years, right? Equivalent to jail. If they don't give me $100,000 from like a middle class person, right? Not that I should talk about class, it's a ridiculous concept, but whatever. From a middle income person who's currently making an average income, it doesn't matter, right? How I spend my money. So we look at this reasoning, these justifications, do they really match up with how we really think? And so it can't be any kind of justification having to do with how the money's spent. Besides, we know how government spends money, just practically speaking, and some of it's useful, so a lot of it's right. So again, it's godlike power. So it's really people's religion, right? If someone sends their kid to school, there's a way that you need to worship government. It has to be your religion, because otherwise, school normalizes these evils like extortion, slavery, the existence of authority in a sense of where there's such a like authority and duty and stuff like that. They only exist as an agreement between two people. Like I can only have a duty if I essentially sign a contract to do so. Right? I can't have a duty. Let's say some person in Tijuana, Mexico, just a normal random person wakes up one day and decides that David Mills should do something. Does that mean I have a duty to do it? That just makes no sense. What if that same random person who I don't know does something for me? Does that then mean I have a duty of any sort? No, that can't, right? Not, it doesn't make any sense. So no other person can ever just fabricate a duty for some person. The only way would be to, with a clear mind, having enough age, whatever that is, whatever it is where I'm agreeing, right? And maybe where there's an exchange of value or something where I have a duty. And authority works the same way. There's no such thing as someone having some magic wand, right? Dude, like it literally doesn't exist. Like a magic wand or a magic name that someone can call themselves or whatever, where all of a sudden they can just decide that I basically have a duty, right? Like duty and authority are intertwined concepts, right? They can just fabricate a duty for me. There's no such thing as that, right? That type of thing doesn't exist. Authority only exists as a concept like a magic wand, like a married bachelor, right? You can have a guy and you could say, this guy's a married bachelor. And I could say, well, that guy can't exist. And if someone's pointing to an actual person, they'd say, come on, this person exists. Look, you poke him and there he is. The person might exist, but that person can't be a married bachelor, right? Not if you don't agree with the meanings of those terms. Similarly, there's no such thing as an actual authority figure in the sense of that there's different meanings, right? The word changes its meaning and but there's a meaning that's logically implied in many cases of authority, right? Where there's such a thing as this sort of magical ability that one person can have over another to impose a duty on that person. That doesn't, there's no such thing as an actual authority figure. That a person can, of course, threaten another person, but that's merely an evil action, right? I might want to comply with that threat so I don't get put in a box or locked in with a bunch of rapists or shot or whatever, right? That people might do. But there's no such thing as an actual authority figure other than if I, whatever, if I agree, it's like with a duty. If I agree I have a duty to something, then maybe you could come up with something like that where I agree that a person can do such and such a thing. And if I'm agreeing with clarity and so forth. But look at the concepts we're eliminating, right? There's literally no such thing anywhere on the planet as an authority figure in any kind of sense of someone that can impose a duty on someone else. That literally doesn't exist. So each and any time someone does it, they're just insane. They're just an insane, violent psychopath. Crazy, right? So to send a child to school is to normalize all, right? The only other justification would be the idea that money is so difficult to make and that the only way to make it, and there's so few jobs, and you need to go into this horrific place that normalizes extortion, slavery, this ridiculous type of authority that doesn't exist, right? All of that is worth normalizing for a young, impressionable child. These terrible concepts of evil, just because we're scared that there's so few jobs, and the only way to really get a job is to prove that you can buy into these contradictory concepts, right? That you can basically be a toady to an authority figure and prove that you can do that well, right? That's how you get good grades in school. And that's literally what you're graded on, right? The teacher makes the test, right? There's no reality test. The teacher themselves makes the actual test, or they're in a system where the system makes it, right? It doesn't matter if there's a group of three people, one who teaches in the classroom, the other one makes the test, right? And the other one does push-ups and looks in the mirror all day, right? Then there's no difference in that system that if the one teacher does all three. Again, this is a matching game. Thinking clearly, I wrote this in the slide. When I say it's a matching game, it's just the same angle on the same concept of if it changes, it's not the same thing, right? If it changes, does it match what it used to be? Obviously not. Doesn't match, right? If it does not change, then, or if nothing relevant changes, does it match? Yeah. That's it. That's all you have to do to think clearly, in essence. But the craziest thing is people don't do it. Like, I don't know anyone, there might be some people, but I don't really know anyone. There might be a couple libertarians here and there, I'm not sure. But that really says what I said about authority, right? Authority figures or authority. Or what I said about school, even though it's patently obvious, right? School is based on extortion. It's funded through extortion. It's part of a whole government system of extortion. And it normalizes, regardless of that, it normalizes, again, the authority idea where a kid has a duty to do this, that, and the other thing. The child is graded on how well they can, like, genuinely believe that it's not even, you're not even supposed to fake it. You're much better off if you believe it, right? If you believe that teacher is an authority figure, which is like trying to believe that the teacher's like a unicorn. Unicorns even aren't as illogical. It's like trying to believe the teacher's a married bachelor. And you're graded on that. So you have to drive yourself insane in order to get good grades. Now you could say, well, I don't buy into it. I'm just going to pretend. And that can work to some degree, but it's going to work less and less as you get into college. They really are testing you on whether you believe in authority. Or they make their own tests. It's the most extraordinary thing. They make their own test. If I did it, it would be an absolute scam. Right? If OMG did it, we make our own tests. You don't have to rank on actual Google. You don't have to make any money. You just pass a test that we ourselves make and pass money. Amazing, right? And then with this belief in authority, for example, which can exist, then we have this intuitive feeling that we all would have absorbed at some point where we deserve. This is related to making money. Everything I'm talking about, I try to relate it to making money for this series for you guys. It's such a problem. Because why don't people connect the dots, right? To make a few million, and you make as much as you need to, but however much you need to, but you figure it out, right? It's not a goal that you set, it's a goal that you reveal, as I've talked. What am I saying here? So I'm saying you need to connect the dots. What am I shoot? Something important. Oh, deserve. Why you make millions by connecting it by finding a product that people are going to pay, right? Getting leads and helping the people reach a decision to become your customer. Now, we're capable of just going out and doing that. But why don't people connect the dots? Because people feel like they deserve. And now we can complete that sentence in a few different ways, but it's very powerful, extraordinarily powerful as a lens that you're using that you don't see because you don't see the lens, you with a lens, right? You perspective or box. But you can examine yourself and you're going to see this almost certainly in yourself. Think about you work all day, every day for the next 2 years. And then ask yourself what you feel like, if you feel like you deserve something for that. And if you're honest with yourself, the answer is probably yes, which is an extraordinarily ridiculous thought, but I can understand it. I can feel it. How do I know you feel it? Because I went to I was raised in the same world with all the same ridiculous ideas, right? We feel like we deserve it. And if you feel like you deserve it, are you going to connect the dots? No. You're going to start connecting the dots and you're going to lose motivation and get frustrated and get whiny and then try to compensate for that by changing your standards, by changing what your goal that now you decide you set goals instead of reveal them. Right. And so you set, oh, I'll just set this goal. It's less, right. Because that's all you're going to achieve by working for what you deserve. Plus, you have an intuitive sense of what you deserve, right? You are artificially given results by authority figures who artificially wave a conceptual magic wand and come up with BS, right? That happens all the way through school. It's so horrendous for people's beliefs and psyches and ideas. It's just unspeakable. But there's a sense that, and then we feel like there's still that cosmic entity doing that. And then we just feel like God or the universe or just the world or whatever abstraction is not giving us what we deserve, and they should, because we still feel that feeling like there's a teacher there giving us our rewards, whether or not it's a private school or public school or what the hell. It's people are so can't imagine outside of government that when they hear that my son is not going to school, they say, "Oh, you're homeschooling." What? Suppose you had to move someplace where the only schools were terrorist training camps, and you decided, I'm not going to go ahead and send my kid to a terrorist training, despite the fact they might also teach math. And someone says, oh, you're not sending them there, so you're going to teach them to be a terrorist at home, right? It's just unbelievable how people think. Of course, we're not homeschooling our son. We're just not sending him to school the same way I don't send him to a terrorist training camp, or the same reason I don't put him in a blender or chop his head off. Or if there was a place where they were going to chop his head off, I wouldn't send him to a child molester. And if I didn't do that, people would say, are you going to molest him at home? No, I'm not going to do that either. My goodness sake. I told you I was going to cut loose today and say what I wanted to say. But so with money, this idea of deserving, you can take a look and see if it's in there. And it's another ridiculous nonsense concept, same as government, in the sense of government doesn't exist as an entity that can make evil into good. It just exists as an entity that does evil. It's just a group, it's like a cult of evil slavers and extortionists, period. That's the end, that full on what government is. Nothing else. It exists as just like a Satan worshiping cult that actually went out and killed people or extorted people could exist as a cult, but it doesn't exist as anything besides. I had a funny thought. If there was like this Satan cult that went out and killed people and by its little children, and they also did some road, and then we said maybe we should do the Satan worshiping cult that killing children, and then people said, but how we didn't have our roads repaired? Maybe by repairing. Anyhow, how are children going to learn anything if we don't send them to a terrorist training camp? Maybe some other way. But it's true. If you cut off ridiculous things, then you think of new stuff, right? The main way that you're going to think of ideas, you don't like it. It's really, you don't have to think of stuff. So much of what all you need to do is cut off the wrong stuff And that opens up a space naturally, and the space gets filled. Our mind just comes up with, right? If you were thinking of it, then you'd think of it before your mind thought of it, and then make your mind think of it, right? Same thing with controlling your mind. It's a nonsense concept. How are you supposed to control your mind? You're going to think about what your mind is supposed to think before your mind thinks of it with your mind. That's nonsense, right? Instead, you want to figure out you want to use the sledgehammer. If it changes, it's not the same thing. And use that to eliminate all the nonsense ideas you absorb and get things straight. But it's not, life isn't complicated. It's not complicated to simply have a child and live with it. That's it. So there they go. And then, of course, you naturally are going to teach your kids, right? Presumably, unless you're not going to talk to your child or interact with your child, right? And then there's all sorts of places they can learn stuff too, right? There's all kinds of people writing books out there. There's this internet that got invented by Al Gore, and there are the apprentice programs. Sorry, not a program. We have a friend down the street, for example, that's looking forward to having a chance to be an apprentice in a couple of years, teach him how to fix cars, air conditioners, things like that, or install stuff like that. And that'll be great. It's a wonderful thing to do when you're 9, 10, 11, 12, right? Get that, do all the apprenticeship at that point. Learning is basically an apprenticeship. If you go to school, you're apprenticing with an extortionist, right? And then more, right? A bunch of stuff, shorthand that. And certainly a government cultist, right? Someone who believes in the goodness and reality of government and the ability of government to fabricate morality, to impose duty on people, and so forth. Ironically, God can't even do that. God can't make an evil act into a good act. And yet people believe government can. God can't make 2 + 3 = 6. God could change your memory of language or whatever. Of course, God can make a language where the words 2 + 3 = 6 were true because they had different meanings. Right? 2 meant something different. But God can't make something that, like a nonsense phrase, true directly. That's why I say that worship of government supersedes people's religion, because they assign powers God doesn't even have to the government. They believe the government can make contradictions true, which God can't even do. And it's not about politics. It's about getting rid of ideas like this deserving thing for money, right? You don't need to go out and revolt against the government or whatever you do with your kids, you do. But if you don't get rid of this authority intimidation thing that's related to deserving stuff, because it's killing you, it's just crushing you. When you know to look for it, it's going to shock you proudly. Notice you feel like you deserve results at some point. Not like you're entitled in the usual sense. Oh, I just do a little bit and I'm entitled, or I'm entitled to other people that are on this webinar, people that are joining OMG, and you're pretty awesome people, right? Relatively speaking. But don't all of us have that sense that at some point we deserve a result, and we deserve to just, at this point, I'm not going to connect the dots anymore. I've done enough for today, right? What kind of idea is I've done enough for today? I don't mean that you have to work longer or not. It's just a nonsense that I've done enough for today, right? You're looking to win. It's not about doing enough for today. You're not trying to satisfy yourself with a good, satisfied feeling of, oh, I've done good work today. Then just quit trying to make money if that's the way you're going to think. And just do that. Just try to satisfy yourself. Just try to feel good about yourself. But the trouble is, you can create a little bubble of reality for yourself where that's all you do. But what's the problem? The problem is we live in a reality as well. We interact with an outside world. And so you can't just have a belief system that's internally coherent. The challenge is it has to integrate with and adapt. That means to the outside world, what's outside, the configuration of it changes. And no, I'm not using words wrong. I just need to explain more in order to explain everything I'm saying and how it all fits. But I'm saying for a second, obvious, right? The outside world changes, right? The world's going to be different tomorrow than today. And also, if you don't make money, you're probably going to run out, and that's probably going to cause you problems, being similar to being sick or unhealthy, right? So you need to make money. And so you can live consistent with the idea that in practice, whether you affirm it or not, if you live as somebody who, oh yeah, I want to feel satisfied at the end of it. What the hell is that? That's fine if you also get that, but you're going to have one priority, right? You're trying to hit one target and not put all kinds of BS, ridiculous limitations in front of yourself, and ones that are going to be counterproductive. So it has nothing to do with what you deserve. It has nothing to do with anyone or some cosmic force or whatever rewarding you or not for what you do. There's just a reality out there, and you are trying to get over a bar when it comes to money, and that's that. You do, that's your priority. You don't ever deserve it or not, you just hit it. And the problem with deserving is not just that it makes you lazy or whatever, the problem and that it makes you not connect the dots. The problem is that there's also can be a limiting number where you sabotage yourself subconsciously because you feel like you only deserve some amount, right? There's all kinds of complicated psychological factors. When you start reading about psychology and the experiments they do and all the tricks your mind can play as it fabricates certainty and kind of approximates the world and does its best to get you through each day and has these heuristics by default, there's so many things. You can't memorize them all and overcome them all in a sense. What you need to do is have the game not be about that. So what, in other words, what you need to do is make it irrelevant what you deserve, right? If you have clarity, when you set a goal, the wrong thing, when you set one, then all of your other feelings and beliefs and thoughts, if you set a goal, it's gray. It's not based on anything. It's not locked in properly. It's just fabricated. So all the other fabricated stuff can compete with it because it's on the same playing field. When you reveal a goal, when you understand, when you have an anchor point, okay, this is the amount of money I need, and here's what I'm going to do with it. And it's clear, right? Like I've gone over. You can get your house paid off, your annuities or something like that, and then your cash to get to before your annuities kick in. Or you can have annuities kick in right now when you're 40 if you want to just I think you can just, I believe you can just annuitize stuff now if you want, however you want to do it. But you reveal it. And then the question just becomes a question of mental integration. Think about it, right? So much of life is getting your feelings to match up with what you'd like them, with what you want to feel like you want to do, or what you feel like what you'd like to enjoy, right? Basically, what you want to enjoy is whatever the heck is going to be within reach, right? What could really happen to you, right? It's within reach in 10 years, you're going to want to enjoy that one way, whatever that might be, right? So you don't want to have mental conflict, and you want your unconflicted, integrated mind to be one that also is ready to integrate with the world as it really turns out. If you accomplish that, then you're in great shape. But now you have clarity on another target that's revealed as right, or that as you figure that out, right? What do you want? You want your concepts, your beliefs, your representation, your model of the world to not contradict itself. And I'm gonna for that to make a pretty cool point in a moment as well. For example, with the deserving thing, that is not the point yet, but for example, with the deserving thing about money, if there's any ideas about how much money you deserve to make, that automatically conflicts with the idea of there's a certain amount you need to make. What the hell does it matter what you supposedly deserve? You just need a certain amount and you do what it takes to get there, right? Or you do the best you know of what it takes, which you think and you take action and and a framework is going to get built for you. Your mind's going to think of stuff for you if it's not blocked, right? So it's not relevant what you want to do or what you deserve. What's relevant is the target and hitting it and figuring out how to gain understanding that's relevant to hitting that target. You keep gaining understanding that's relevant to hitting the target of your 3 to 5 million or 2 to 5 million. Including some of that understanding might be how to spend less money, right? Then you reduce your 5 to 3 or 2, whatever it is, right? And this isn't the point at which you necessarily stop making money. It's the point at which money is no longer a problem. You're not metaphorically sick anymore. I'm not calling someone sick for not having enough money. What I'm saying is it's the same. It's just like if someone has a disease or that hurts them, right? If they themselves feel less energy or in pain or whatever that take medication, then that just makes life less pleasant. And if you yourself are attending to that disease and trying to deal with it, that implies you don't want it, right? Money is like, right? Being healthy doesn't in and of itself just make you happy all the time, but being unhealthy messes with your happiness for sure. So as long as you're behaving, what you want to do is get to the point where you're not behaving like you're deficient or sick when it comes to money, right? Unhealthy, where it's a need or a necessity or something you have to do. You get it. What you feel like doing or whatever, what your passion is and all that stuff, what your strength is relevant only as it relates to figuring out what you can produce, right? What product you can fulfill or the other parts of the business, connecting the dots. But connecting the dots comes first, absolutely, as an absolute priority. And then whatever else you understand, if it serves connecting the dots, great. The minute it gets in the way of connecting the dots, it's counterproductive. Where, oh, I'm only going to do this because that's my passion. That's my strength. I'm going to focus on that. Focus on connecting the damn dot. And you might not need to know much about what your strength is. You'll naturally do well with it or notice what's helping. But a lot of noticing what's helping is just stuff that just looks like it's helping, right? That's neurologically close to the result. But you want to understand what the ingredients are that really need to be there in order to get the three parts of your business straight and make your money. All right. Now, objects. Now I was going to say a thing that's going to be impactful related to this sledgehammer. And I've started to talk about it, but I'll continue. If objects in the outside world change, then that's not what your thoughts and your words are referring to. You need to integrate with the outside world somehow. And yet, what you're thinking about are mental objects. You basically have a model of the world where you stipulate there's such a thing as a dog, there's such a thing as a tree, there's such a thing as this person. And that person's an object, like a thing that there's something inherently the same about them or that object. And then there's a number of things, obviously, that can change about those things as well. But with a mental object, you're making like a folder, like a folder like on a computer. You're labeling it. You're making what amounts to sort of like a category. As I said, like not quite a category, not quite a folder, but like, and the content can change, related things can change, associations can change. But there's something that is still about it. But that's all a fabrication that's useful and necessary for thinking, right? And what you can do, you can't know perfectly about the outside world. What you can know is about what you're stipulating in your own mind, the mental objects and stuff that you're playing with. And you can start to get things straight. And you can look at all the stuff I've talked about in this webinar, other webinars where I talk about things that are correct and I point out ideas that are correct. And just like I said, is feeling like you deserve to make money? You think it through just with your mental object and just see if it matches and adds up. What if you have two people, I'll say person A and person B. I won't give them names because it would be someone's name, right? I just think you'll wonder what I'm talking about. But if person A is, as a priority, they feel like they're going to work and they deserve something at some point. So picture how that's going to turn out for a person, how they're going to be frustrated, how it's going to limit how they work, how they're going to pick and choose. Instead of prioritizing connecting the dots, they prioritize what they feel like doing in essence, right? And so if they do something where they don't feel like doing, they'll do that sometimes, but there'll be like a timer on it, right? Like a little kitchen timer, ding, ding, tick, 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 ding, where they've had enough of doing that thing that they don't want to do, right? Isn't that true? Doesn't that add up with how if we imagine that, right? Just thinking this person is based on like what they deserve in terms of their work. And then you have another person that is focused on connecting the dots. They just need to figure it out and do what it takes. They don't need to repeat the phrase, I'm going to do what it takes. It's just obviously you do what it takes because that's the nature of having a priority, right? And hitting a target. What are you going to do? I'm hitting a target, but I'm not going to do what it takes. That makes no sense. And again, you can have, there's one boundary that we already know, which is you don't violate the property rights of somebody else. So long as you're not doing that, then there's no other reason why you need to have a boundary. It's related. You can have people in your life, right, that you spend some time with. But ultimately, you do what it takes, right? It's not that complicated versus things that obviously interfere with that. I'm trying to think. There's something intuitively that's interesting to me about taking vacation. It's like, where does that come from? You're looking to hit a goal. When you schedule a vacation, the problem is it comes with an implication. And when you follow the law of implication, you're basically saying, I'm not going to do whatever it takes. Like that doing whatever it takes, I need to take a break from doing whatever it takes. Like I'm arbitrarily going to let go of a target for a little while. That's going to be better. But if a target is really helpful, remember there's a whole worldview that's screwed up, that then there's like mistake piled on mistake, because you make one mistake and then do other mistakes to make up for it. Reminds us of government once again, to cause one problem and then make a policy to undo it. Yeah. School turns people into psychopaths, right? And then they want to stop school shootings by making it illegal. But now, once again, we have a matching game. But you know what we should do? We should make murder illegal. That'll stop school shootings. Oh, wait, murder is illegal. Oh, wait, that doesn't stop school shooting. So why should making anything else illegal stop school shootings? Right? It's just a matching. You just find nonsense things. That doesn't lead to a conclusion one way or the other about whether something should be banned or not. But it removes that contradiction. And then you can see more clearly to think about whatever issue. But it's a funny thought, and it's weird, right? Because a lot of people have that thought that we need to make something illegal in order to stop school shooting, and yet they're already illegal, right? Murder is illegal, and it's not stopping the people from school shooting. So we're going to make one more thing illegal, and that's going to do it, right? Like purchasing a gun. Why not if we want to make another thing illegal, why not prevent every single person from leaving their house? If anyone leaves their house, they get killed by a government. That's fine, right? Government can make anything it wants moral just by being government. And now it prevents school shootings too. You just make another thing illegal, right? Okay. So to know what's true, to think clearly and accurately, it comes down to matching, mismatching. And I've referred to this before, right? But I'm trying to hit you with a sledgehammer today, including you can see when and how you violate this nonstop and how other people do. And keep repeating to yourself that whatever it is your words refer to, right? Now, if the meaning of a word changes, you're now literally can't think. Everything's nonsense and gibberish. So the meanings of words can't change without destroying all meaning. There's a simple test if you ever want something simple, as I call it, like the punch in the face test. If you follow a premise and it makes it reasonable to just go punch someone in the face, then the premise must be wrong, right? So, for example, if we say the meanings of words can change, that's all right. Then suppose someone says, hello, David. And I decide that since meanings of words can change, hello, David can change into please punch me in the face. I agree to have you punch me in the face, so I punch him in the face, right? If meanings of words can change, you're justified in punching anyone in the face anytime you want, right? The meaning can just change into please punch me in the face. So they give him permission, as far as you can tell, right? So the very nature of coherent, everything devolves into nonsense if words can just change their meaning anytime they want. Hi, I'm David can mean, hey, I like molesting children, right? Just change the meanings of my words. But if words can change legitimately, then they can change anything. Maybe words can just change a little bit, right? Who decides a little bit, etc. The word good is an example that changes massively, right? Pretty much any great or good argument is incorrect. Let's see here. So if it changes, it's not the same thing. I was saying that thinking comes down to matching. So you think about the world via mental object, right? Your mind creates a fabrication. It has to be a fabrication, right? Remember, the normal view of the world is that our words refer to stuff in the world, right? Our thoughts and our words refer to stuff in the world. And at the same time, we believe that those things that our words and our thoughts are referring to change. That can't be correct. That's why there's a sledgehammer. As you think this through, it can and should, and necessarily you need to, mashes your whole concept of what thinking means and representing the world and your mental model and everything. So what our mind does is it creates object, it fabricates in a kind of a mental world or mental representation of the world. But it's necessary and helpful. But remember how I talked about with a car? I love these car analogies, right? Because there's two that are really important. One is the idea that the fact that your car drives straight when it's driving is great. It's not a problem, but it's a problem if you don't steer it when it's going into a house, right? It's great the way our mind does what it does, but we need to work with it properly. And the other thing to remember is that this type of thinking that I'm talking about, where we're thinking without perspectives, When I talked about last time that we have to be able to think without perspectives in order to think about our lenses themselves or our most outer lenses. And then we can use those most outer lenses and in a sense and think about at some point a lot of stuff that's outside the box for a lot of people is inside the box for us because we got our foundational perspective, which that makes it easier. But we need to be able to think without perspectives in order to start to fix some of these major problems with our thinking and understand how our thinking and how our perspectives work and how our mental model interacts with our thinking and our world and all that stuff. How it all, in order to catch stuff like this deserving thing that I talked about, in order to figure out why we're not connecting the dots that we need to become multimillionaires, in order to spot these contradictions. Why does our mind not spot contradictions normally? See, our mind does not, matching is not something our mind does. Our mind, it fabricates and it associates. So our mind literally associates things that don't match as if they match. People will say God is good. I'm not saying God isn't good, but it will say rice is tasty. Let's just use that. When I say God is good, God and good are not synonyms. Rice and tasty are not the same thing. And you say that's not what you mean. You mean it's like when you say rice is tasty, you just mean it has the quality of being tasty. But really, there's a way that people really are substituting. Their associations take the place of matching in a way that, again, like the car, it's great that it goes forward. It's great that your mind associates. It's great that your mind fabricates meaning. But without you doing something additional, it's a train, it's a car wreck. And that's what we see around us. That's what people's lives are relative to what they could be. By the way, someone whose mind is mentally integrated, where there's very few contradictions, they're very congruent, it's very attractive. What attracts us to other people is when they have qualities we want, right? You know, I said people want to control their mind. And again, what characterizes it that way. But whenever someone feels like that, what they really want is to be integrated, right? To have their mind not have internal conflict and external conflict, right? Like someone that doesn't have internal conflict, but they're frustrated and angry all the time. They're just not conflicted about that. If someone's just like a angry jerk, where again, they're not conflicted really, you don't spot a lot of conflict in them, they're just an angry jerk all the time. That's not attractive. But what's attractive is when someone is in harmony and integration with their environment pretty consistently, and then as well with their own mind. That's very attractive. Why? Because it's what we want for ourselves. That's what we're generally attracted to other people, right? Is what we want for ourselves. Which means, right, we're just playing a matching game right now too. What does that match up with? That means if you want to make money, you obviously want to be attractive to people. 1/3 of making money at least is attracting new leads, right? So to speak. And then really that's going to help you with conversion. It's going to help you with a lot of fulfillment typically as well. So it's going to help you extremely a lot if you're the more attractive you are. And the more in harmony you are with your own mind, the more your mind is in harmony with itself. And the more you're in harmony with the environment, which means reality. And you can't be in harmony with reality by declaring you are. Right? It needs to actually happen. Right? Like you can't fit in with the environment in a harmonious way, like musical notes or whatever in a symphony. You don't just say, this symphony is good by declaring it, right? It has to actually be a well-composed symphony. Presumably, I'm not a composer, but you know what I'm saying? You can't just do it by intent. You have to actually accomplish. So it's great for making money to be attractive, and you get to be attractive through integration. And you can only really get integrated. You can get lucky, right? Without this stuff. Obviously, you don't need me inherently, but law of implication in my training is about not getting lucky. It's about making it happen yourself. So someone could say, why do I need this? I could just get lucky and be mentally integrated. But the number of people that worship government, right, which they're affirming all sorts of insane concepts and evil concepts that lead to massive suffering in the world, right? There's very little practical difference between being a worshiper of the American God, which is a full tyranny, right? In a literal sense, where the government owns your body, everything you make, everything, all your real property, everything, all your money, everything. They own it legally. And then you'll believe that the government allows you to keep some of this, which means the government owns it all, right? Because that it allows us. So U.S. is a full tyranny. That means that you're someone who believes in the U.S. government, law, or whatever, is a party to the greater tyranny throughout the world. Does that make sense? They're agreeing with and joining with all tyranny throughout history and all of the acts, all of the horrors of both the United States and other places. And I affirm that the United States is better than most. And I think that the US Constitution was just about the best actual attempt as anyone's made on a large scale, especially. So I'm not coming from that end where the US is worse than other places. But tyranny, absolute tyranny is absolute tyranny. The United States is an absolute tyranny. And if someone's agreeing with it, then they're a part of a voluntarily joining a group, a cult of tyranny that's done unbelievable things throughout history. And they're part of that cult. And so there's a pretty major non-integration with reality and one's own mind, right? It's not integrated to be against slavery, but think of yourself as a Republican or Democrat or American, or generally think that the American government is good or necessary, right? If I think slavery is necessary, that most everyone believes that if I were to just announce slavery is necessary. And yet the United States government is involved with slavery, right? Slavery is legal and practiced in the United States by government. It's just illegal for private citizens, just like it's illegal for private citizens to extort other private citizens, but the government does it nonstop, right? And the government does all sorts of evils. Some don't even really have a name. What's the name for, or they have innocuous names like regulation, right? If my neighbor hires another neighbor down the street to be a babysitter, and I forcibly prevent that from happening with a gun, then that's regulation. It's an innocuous name, but it's regulation. I'm interfering with two people doing a deal, right? Performing a contract, whatever you call it, interacting. And I'm interfering with that. It's actually very evil. It's very violent and evil. It's a horrific idea, horrific action. So there's a major non-integration. And here's my point. Is that going to be the only thing that people are non-integrated about? If that big, my point about bringing up government is if something that big and really obvious, right? Slavery is not like a hidden, like it's not a tiny thing that's like should slip onto the radar. And yet it does, like with the military draft or jury duty and so forth, or even actual literal full-blown racial slavery like was in America. If someone believes in the law, then, or America, you must believe in at least the law, right? If you affirm the law, you affirm the legitimacy of government in general, or the legitimacy of the American government, or a state government, let's say, if those are legit, whatever you want to do it. But anything that does logically include any of these types of slavery, then that's a major thing that slipped under someone's radar. The point is not about that. I'm not here to rail against jury duty or some such. The point is, if that obvious as slavery slips under someone's radar, then there's something really wrong with the radar. And then if that same person is not becoming a multimillionaire, and then a lot of people become multimillionaires, right? Like there's, I don't know, tens of thousands just in America of there's a fairly large number of these people. So it's not like it's that out of reach, is my point, right? Compared to how people generally can't think really straight. So if that type of thing is slipping under people's radar with our worldview, and then if we're not making the kind of money we want, then you try to find clues wherever you can find them, right? The same meta stuff that can fix that, right? Like you can pull on that thread and maybe you'll find something that'll help you make money, is my point, right? There's no real immediate practical value to however you think about jury duty. I get that, or even how you vote in the sense probably the election's not going to be decided by one person. I do believe there's a practical difference between candidates, even though they're both Republican and Democrat platforms, their worldviews are both insane, but I believe that there's a practical effect of one versus the other. I wrote here, what is the relationship between thinking and feeling? So people talk about, oh, that person just feels, they don't think, or they want to, or as a practical matter, we constantly would like to know that we're going to feel like doing the same thing that we think we need to do. And as I pointed out earlier, we tend to be, if we look at it in the right way, we'll see that we tend to be afraid that we won't feel like doing something that it turns out we have to do because we didn't expect we had to do it, right? We worry that if we do a bunch of work and it gets deleted, and then we won't feel like doing it a second time, then we'll feel upset about it. And then that might cause us to feel scared if we think that it got deleted for a second. Like, oh my God, it got deleted. I'm going to have to do this again. If we feel that way, that must mean that we're afraid. Because think about what that means. If we have that moment of, that's terrible, like this might be terrible. I might have just deleted hours of work I have to redo. That's the most normal reaction in the world, right? And yet it's total nonsense because let's break that down. So we're afraid what's going to happen. Let's say our work does get deleted. Then, and let's say that work needs to be done. It's the priority, regardless of whether it was deleted or not. Once we notice it gets deleted, we clearly need to redo it because of the reality of what's going on in real life, right? So then it's the number one thing that we need to do. It's our priority. At that point, a mentally integrated person obviously feels like doing it because it's the priority. It's the thing that's going to have the most positive impact in their lives. That's what a priority literally means, right? That's what matches. If it doesn't change, right, it's the same thing, right? What priority literally means. A priority isn't just a label. It turns into a label because people have, just like with goals, people think you set priorities. So they think, because this is what our brain does, they think that priorities are just fabricated, that there's no reality, there's nothing, but what the word really must mean, imply or match, it actually matches something, a concept, which is, it's not just a word that you fabricate, a priority. It's that which is going to have the most positive impact on our lives, going to give us the most goodness for the rest of our lives compared to anything else we could do, any other building block, any other task, anything else we could accomplish. That's literally what priority means. Is it's our best guess at what's going to give us the most goodness. So anything other than fully feeling like you want to do it is a full-on mental mistake. It's a non-integration with your mind. I'm not being critical of it, except that it's obvious nonsense. I'm helping you see that. You might say, well, David, I see it, but that only makes me more frustrated because I still don't feel it. Okay, so now that brings us to what is the relationship between thinking and feeling. So there's a greater box, greater lens that you have wrong if you're coming to that conclusion. And let's get it right now. We might be able to do that. And because I think I can give you a mental picture or a way to look at it that might just kind of immediately make sense and relax you. And it's related to other stuff I talked about, building frameworks and letting it build. And I think a nice feeling, if you've heard that, of realizing that, oh, this framework is going to build, I can chill out. Here's a relationship between feeling and thinking, including when you think something or you want to want something, but it's not happening yet. And you think of it like a mustard seed or like a framework that's building. It's okay if your mind is not integrated right now. Life is not about already being awesome, is it? So we have that greater box that I keep referring to about people have an incorrect box that if you're don't have that box, you don't have that foundation or lens or perspective, you're in much better shape. So once you realize how stupid it is, how internally contradictory it is, and how it leads to lots of other contradictions, to want to believe that your boxes are already great, in other words, that you're already awesome. What does you're already awesome mean? It means your foundations are awesome, your perspectives are awesome, right? Your mental models are, right? But that's what it must mean, right? Our mind fabricates our outer boxes from when we're an infant and from absorbing the environment and so forth. It fabricates them, and then we have and then we live our lives trying to prove that what got fabricated is awesome or real. Real, but what does real mean? Real means you can stand on it, it's solid, foundational, it's correct. In other words, awesome. So when we have that perspective, all these other problems flow from it, because when we're busy trying to prove that we're awesome, in other words, that our foundations are already correct, then we don't have the patience to let it get built. Once we flip that outer box, life becomes so radically much easier. All kinds of consequences and ripple effects and ripple bad ideas get rippled well instead of rippled wrong. That's like a fork in it. So here's the fork or the two alternatives. The wrong idea is I want to believe that my boxes, my foundational beliefs, with your foundational beliefs tend to be your method for even knowing what's true and for thinking, right? You want to think that the ideas you come up with are good. Where do the ideas that you come up with come from? They come from your thinking process itself, right? So being awesome having your outer boxes right is also about having that which produces your thoughts is hopes to be awesome. That which produces your beliefs, that which produces your plan, that which produces your actions, right? I thought of this. I was right. All that stuff, right? You can feel gratitude about that. That's different. Gratitude's different, but there's a certain sense of triumph, a sort of arrogant, triumphalist confirmation bias thing that generally is what's going on. So now let's look at the correct way and see how that plays out. So the correct way is thinking and getting what I want to do is get my outer boxes and then all my boxes, all my whole mental model. I want it to be ideal. Ideal means it's integrated with itself and it's most adaptable to the environment, which means it's strong where it can be known and it's fully strong where it can be known because anything that's true, like 2 + 3 = 5, you don't want flexibility on that. You want solidity on that stuff, right? Or that fairness is an irrelevant concept, except in a very clear situation, very narrow situation, or justice, or the idea of individual property rights, or the idea of goals are revealed rather than set. Priorities are revealed. Priority, the word, the concept matches the idea of that which has the most permanent impact on your life. That's your best guess at what has that. Your best guess at it. Those are examples of concepts that should be solid because they're always true. They can't be false. And so what you want your boxes to be ideally, sorry, you want your whole model of the world to be your whole mind, the configuration of your mind, the ideas that are set up in your mind. You want them to be solid wherever you can figure out that they should be solid. And otherwise, you want them to be as adaptable as possible, fully adaptable. So you want strength plus flexibility, both in their right places. That's the secret to happiness. The secret to happiness or pleasure in the moment is a match, a fit between the configuration of the world and your mind, what it wants. That's what makes you feel good in the moment. What makes you feel happy overall, the secret to happiness, whatever, but the formula, not the secret, the formula for happiness, the other ones are false. This one is correct. So we already know that you're looking to have a fit between the environment and what your mind wants in the moment. So you take that, keep that, and then the ascent, a feeling that you can adapt. So you have strength and flexibility. The adaptability comes from both strength and flexibility in the right place. Think about it for a second. Imagine that whatever happens in the environment in the future, you are going to feel great about it in actuality, including you'll continue to exist and your mind will adapt in a way where you will respond optimally and you will feel good. It'll fit well. You basically have strength and adaptability and triumph in the future. Notice how that makes you feel if you were to believe that. You could imagine believing that enough that you can tell. Now, someone might say, what if I feel like that, but it's not true? Then you'll feel happy while you feel like that. And then the fact that it's not true will create conflict, which will obviously create doubt, right? If you have false beliefs, what's going to happen is they're going to conflict with the real world at some point. That they can conflict with each other potentially, but they're also going to come into conflict with the outside world. So if you're wrong about that, it's going to be a fleeting happiness. If you're right about it, it'll be a more permanent happiness. That's wonderful, right? And everything we're building together in Law of Implication Breakthrough 2018 is exactly towards that end, which also will make you attractive, which also will help you clear out ideas that are interfering with you making money. It'll help you make money by being attractive. It'll help you make money by planning better, prioritizing more accurately, having goals reveal and focus on them better. Not having by your actions, you have certain priorities and goals that your actions imply that you have, right? If you were to watch yourself or another person for a day or a week, you could say, practically speaking, here's your priority. Here's what took precedence. Practically speaking, here's the goal that you're going after in terms of here's your actual trajectory. Just like you watch a jet plane for a while, you'll say, here's where you're going to end up. Then that, practically speaking, is your goal. You obviously want that to be integrated and to match the goal that should reveal itself. as the threshold or target that's going to be best for you. And you want your priority to reflect that. You want to act as if, the priorities are in line with neither is set. Both are understood. But I have this thread that's open that's really awesome. That'll be one of the last things I'll cover here, but it's huge. It's thinking and feeling. And I was drawing a contrast between the normal way of people have this deep perspective they don't realize where they're trying they're trying to uphold the fabrication of their outer boxes being great. The outer boxes being that which produces their thought, basically, which then leads but their actions as well. They want to believe their actions were awesome, that flowed from their thoughts, that were awesome, that flowed from the source of their thoughts, which is just totally awesome. And that's how people live their lives, and it causes all kinds of horrible ripple effects. I refer to them, you can work them out for yourself. The correct perspective foundation is that you build and whatever it is, every new glimpse of a distinction that gives you more of a sense, more of a clarity of what's correct. More things, and it's a matching game. You're like, oh, this matches this, or this doesn't match this. I was acting as if these two things matched, but they don't. I was acting as if my stated priority was my actual priority that my actions imply, but there's actually different. So I need to look out for every new insight. So if you have a realization of something that you want to accomplish or that you want to feel that you'd like to have integrated throughout your mind, but right now it's just a starting thought that you have a clarity on where you want to get something, including if it changes, it isn't the same thing. You probably have hundreds of beliefs that directly contradict, that violate this idea. If it changes, it isn't the same thing. But you also probably have that anchored inkling that you're like, I really agree, Dave, that if it changes, it's not the same thing. That's true. But your mind isn't integrated with it. So the correct perspective is, so the I'm already awesome perspective is what I'll call it the wrong perspective that everyone tends to have. The other perspective is we'll call it the mustard seed perspective. The mustard seed perspective is we value the mustard seed. We don't get upset that it's not a bush yet because we're not trying to prove that a seed is already a bush. We're letting it grow. And we value that it will grow. And if we have the seed, it'll grow. You can carry out the metaphor a bit in a useful way. How does a seed grow? You tend to it, right? How do you grow your mental integration with the sledgehammer? If it changes, it's not the same thing. Or if it doesn't change in a relevant way, it is, like your plans and your goals, your revealed goal. It starts with a seed and you tend to it. You use it a little bit. You think about how it relates to stuff that you're doing, right? And then your understanding of it will grow. Your integration will start to grow. And it won't be complete yet, and it'll keep growing. And so if there's one thing I could go back and tell myself in business that would have really helped me both accomplish more faster and feel way happier while I was doing it and less panicked and angry and frustrated and so forth, it would be that what we do is our feelings about what we think we're going to want to do in the future. For example, we might think, oh, I don't want to learn that whole new software. Right there. Okay. That type of thought, that genre of thought, iterated, will cause such an efficiency and block you off from such money making, right? Here's another example. Oh, I don't want to go just get a whole new product and a whole new genre because I want to stick with the product that I have basically and just tweak it. Right? I don't want to go out. All right. So as soon as we have that thought, what's going on there is a lack of a sense. It's an incorrect extrapolation. It's a lack of a sense that a framework will build. What our mind does is think of having to do that new thing with our existing tiny non-existent framework for it. Just like a new software, you don't have a framework for it yet, let's say, right? And so your mind imagines trying to do that or going networking. And you're like, I don't know these people. How are they going to become prospects? That's true. You don't have a framework right now. But if you have this, the more you integrate this idea that a framework will build, and the more you stop basing your feelings and then what you go after based on this very incorrect and counterproductive extrapolation of the framework will never build. That's what the implication is. Oh, I don't want to go learn this new software. Because the idea is that basically you feel like the framework won't build. You don't feel like you'll master it. You feel like you'll just not be nice. But if you can't make enough money with your existing product, if enough people aren't willing to pay enough money for it, then you need a different product. Now, but David, how do you know? Maybe it's traffic, maybe it's conversion. I have a rule of try it 3 times. Now, this is an eyeballing technique. At some point, you don't know everything, but give it like 3 good tries with what you have in your current box, so to speak. And if the 3 tries don't work, then you're probably better off looking for different box, right? And you start by just stepping back and talk to people, get different perspectives, different ideas. So what's the relationship between thinking and feeling is that think of a thought like using an anchor, like a seed, but a seed that's anchored in place, right? I'm mixing metaphors of 2 things there, but you want both of those concepts. It's a starting point, and you got to respect that starting point. And it's about building from that starting point rather than looking at all the stuff that's not built and how the bush isn't built yet or feeling like it'll never get built or the framework and the feelings catch up. The feelings start to grow, right? As you take action on that seed, whatever it is. Sometimes at first you might not take action on that seed because your feelings just aren't there and it's just too much. But other times you will, right? And whatever it is, focus on the seed. Focus on what you do have, what you do know. The biggest killer, whenever I talk about how to know what's true and the fundamental method of matching and that if it changes, it's not the same thing and so forth, people's whole block, gripe, or complaint, or thing that gets in their way is what? The same thing, though, fundamentally, to get in your way in business. It's not enough. I want more faster. So I want that magic pill, that magic wand, that shiny object, whatever it is. It's not enough, it's big enough, fast enough. So I need something else. But it's what you got. It's the right thing. Grow seeds and grow frameworks and look at life that way. Not in terms of, I need it to already be awesome, right? What is it like, I don't want to learn that new software. I don't want to go network because I don't know people. It's like whenever you go in a place you don't have a framework, the problem is if if you don't want to do it, it implies that you're in this, I'm awesome, I'm already awesome frame because I won't feel awesome. I'm supposed to feel like I already have the framework. I only want answers that tell me I already have the framework. I already got it, right? A great sales pitch I use myself is you got it. You almost got it. It's just a little bit more and you buy this product and that's all you need. Teeny weeny bit. You're already awesome, right? If you're going to sell something, tell people you're already awesome. That's what people want. And this will prove it. This will prove you're already awesome. That's the sales pitch people want to hear. So use it. But don't live your life that way, obviously. Think how beautiful you feel when you stop trying to prove, obviously incorrectly, that you're already awesome, because you're already awesome means you are the most wisest, enlightened person at 1 year old that could ever be. That's just so stupid, but that everyone implies that for themselves. Right? I talked about that in OMG Live a couple of years. The minute someone's 1 year old thought process that they had at 1, because that's where everything else came from. Where did their 2 year old thought come from when they're from their 1 year old, right? We're state dependent. We're based on what came before, and then we add to it. The environment interacts with our mind, right? There's 2 things interacting. It builds and interacts. So people act on the implication that they were the wisest person ever, virtually omniscient at 1 year old or 6 months old, right? Because their 2 year old thinking came from their 1 year old thinking and their environment, and then their 3 year old thinking and so forth. And people never revamped it. When did they revamp it? When they were 10, 12, 18? Never. When they went to college and decided their professors were so much smarter than their parents, right? Both don't have things figured out. So that's the relationship between thinking and feeling is the feeling will catch up. It's the same relationship between starting to learn something and mastery. Mastery, does it come first? Do you learn something by starting with what you're a master at and then going from there and then learning? Once you do that, you get in the expert mentality. You're scared to learn anything new, right? You have to prove that you're the master already, you're the expert. and you stay in your box. How do you learn optimally? You learn with a seed and you help it grow. And you have that attitude while it's growing. Now you're going for mastery typically, or you're going for hitting a threshold, whatever it is. You're learning in order for as part of accomplishing a revealed goal, right? Threshold, getting over a bar. So mastery is whatever you need to learn in order to get over the bar that you're trying to get to accomplish your goal, right? You hit your target. But you see how like when you have the right worldview, it all fits together, it all makes sense. Easy to think of these things. So the relationship between thinking and feeling is the same relationship as mastery and learning. It starts with thinking, there's your seed, and your feelings, they're not less important. Is mastery less important than beginning to learn? No, but it obviously comes afterward, right? So when people talk about what's your passion, whenever it starts with feelings, that's the wrong order. It's the same as trying to start with mastery before you learn something. It makes no sense. Your feelings are based on however awesome you already are, right? If your feelings were right already about whatever the new goal you're trying to hit, you wouldn't have to, the goal would already be accomplished years ago. In essence, I'm being simplistic, right? Or big picture, but you don't ask how you feel. Like, how about if it changes, it isn't the same thing? There's all kinds of truths that you feel are correct that violate it. So what do you start with? Do you start with if it changes in the same thing, thinking, a seed? But people say, oh, some people say, think, I don't feel. Some people, they feel, they don't, they feel. It's about priority. And you damn well want your thinking, your feelings to catch up, just like you want to master what you're learning enough to do it well enough. So feelings are super important because mental integration is super important. Your mental integration is like your default current, right? It's driving you along. How you feel realistically drives you along. If you're fighting against how you feel, it takes some sort of energy or, it's a drain. So you can say, wait, David, which one are you saying? Again, you treat what you know as a seed and you do your best to act upon it as much. Let's say you have a certain amount of energy, you have enough energy to go against how you feel for an hour each day. Let's just stipulate that. I'm not saying that's the case or not. Then the answer starts to reveal itself, perhaps. So you figure something out and it's new and it goes against how you currently feel, of course, because your feelings are just associations based on a thinking method that you have when you're a 1-year-old. So you realize something new or a goal reveals itself, but you don't really feel like doing all the stuff that needs to happen in order to achieve it. So you go against or maybe you feel like doing some of it. Probably realistically, you probably feel like doing some stuff, but there's stuff you don't feel like doing. So you have enough energy mental energy, whatever, conscious energy, whatever, to go against your feelings in a sense. Like you try to keep your focus on what you want, right? You know how you go against your feelings. Like you refocus on what you want and get yourself taken. You can do that to a certain degree in life. So you do that. And then what's going to happen? It's going to start to integrate. Like your feelings will start to build more in the right direction, right? You'll start to get more integrated around the new thought. And so whether or not you can keep doing it all the time, maybe you can, maybe you can't. And right. But basically but by having this way of looking at, it'll actually motivate you. It'll maximize your motivation for going against your feelings when it means going with something that you can tell by thinking is correct. Because when you have this mental image, this greater perspective, this outer box, that as you act and think in line with something you know to be true, your feelings and mental integration and neural connections build in accordance with what you know has to be true. And your feelings to the contrary are just a remnant of obviously incorrect associations. See, one last thing I was hoping to say, I'll just kind of refer to it right now, is the more I talk about this stuff and the more we see where our feelings come from, understand the relationship between thinking and feeling and all that, like I just described, and all these related things I'm talking about here, The more you get rid of the power of your mind to what it's not the feelings that cause you such a problem, like the incorrect feelings. There's something that goes with them. It's the idea, and I've referred to this in the past. It's the idea that the source of those feelings might know something you don't, might be really wise. Think about it, right? If you're like, I don't feel like doing this, that goes along with it. Maybe there's a good reason for that, right? If you're honest with yourself or if you look at it. Take away that. Here's what's fascinating. You take away that extra thing of maybe there's a good reason for it, and the power of those feelings is massively reduced. In other words, their ability to mess with you, to get in the way of acting on what you know has to be correct. It's that sense that there's this wisdom, which remember, if you have confirmation bias that you're already awesome, that's confirmation bias of that supposed wisdom of the outer box that you got when you were one that's so intimidating all the time. It's that intimidation, it's that sense. And once we break that your mind is already has this wide source in it that gives you your feelings that you should maybe pay attention to because it's really wise. It might know something you don't. That's where so much of the power. You remove that, and it's way easier to go with what you're thinking is correct. And then the more you go with what you're thinking is correct, the more your feelings catch up fully, and the more your mind gets integrated. And that's the proper relationship between thinking and feeling. So the proper relationship is to remove this. Maybe there's this real deep wisdom inside of me. And I want to believe that too, because that would mean I'm awesome. If my feelings are already correct, if I feel like not doing work, and if that feeling is correct, then that means I'm awesome. Think about it, right? Because the source of your feelings is correct. That means you're awesome. That's great to already be awesome. I'm being sarcastic. If that power gets removed, then it's so much easier to act on what you know to be. And then you act on it more, it gets integrated even faster, and there's a whole virtuous cycle in life efficient. And then you accomplish more and more of these revealed goals. And so more and more of your life and your environment and your resources get built up. And it's just like runaway train, and that's my life. Basically. Okay. Excellent. That is good for now. I'm going to take off for just a minute and then I'll go to discussion. Brush it here. Right back. All right. I think that turned out pretty well, actually. I'm always kind of in the same place as you are, like not quite sure what's going to come out of my mouth and then seeing how things flow. But I think I covered the main concepts I wanted to cover and made some sort of case for them. Faith says, I just got through listening to last week's webinar replay. Really important about the outer frame of money needing to be connected. Yeah, that was a good one about if we're vague about our money plan, then that implies that vagueness is helpful and so forth. Absolutely good, Faith. I'm glad that helped. Wonderful series. Great to have you here, Megan. Hope you're feeling well. The wobble of meaning. Now that is clarity. Thank you. Yeah. I don't get like hugely into words and keeping them consistent and so forth, but I gave you an outer frame that can let you work on that yourself. And I may well address that further, but basically you need to put yourself in a position to match things. Like a word needs to be tied to something that you can identify that's clear. Just like with goals, you reveal the boundaries of the meaning of a word and reveal rather than you can't just define, right? Whenever you're fabricating meaning, associating as matching, that's all the default that is like your car driving forward. It's not bad, but it's absolutely insufficient. And it leads to a car crash if you don't steer it. So it gives you what your brain does to start with, fabricating meaning and associating. It provides you with the raw material to do something. If your brain didn't do any of that, you'd have nothing to work with. Just if a car didn't drive forward in the way that it's going, you'd have nothing to work with when you're steering it, right? But then we really need to be clear on meanings. And I wrote the circling a word technique. I referred to this in the past, but you can use this either in your business planning or thinking about stuff about your business or anything else, including like figuring out the deepest stuff about life, whatever, is you start by writing down a sentence about whatever you think you want or a question you have. And then you start circling like keywords such as, I want to have a better product. And you might circle better and try to get a sense of what that might mean. And what does product mean? And what is, if you want. Now, you may or may not need to address what you mean by the word I in order to make money. But on the other hand, it might be just the breakthrough you need. You never know, right? It's about, are you lucky enough that your outer frames do or don't need to be all fixed, including your idea of who you are in order for you in particular to make money? Is that where is that going to help clear up a block or help you have a breakthrough? It might. It is what I did. No, that sort of stuff. That's where I went first. I got my meta frames right. And then it made things relatively easier. It still wasn't as easy as it could have been if I understood everything I understand now. I have a lot more understanding now than even 5 years ago or 3 years ago or even a week ago. David is on fire. I love it. Excellent. Glad that you felt that. Already the best webinar I've ever attended. Hashtag terrorist training. Excellent. Love it. Glad that surpassed the past. Telling it like it is, cutting loose the imposed. That must have been when I was talking about authority and such. Brian says, wow, the imposed authority plays out through so many areas of society. Oh my gosh. Everywhere on every level, constantly. That and the idea of deserving stuff. The idea of kind of a circular imposition of results where it's like people make a test or we feel like we should deserve a result. We deserve a potential client to say yes. We deserve for a website to rank. And hopefully it hit you guys how thinking about what you deserve just does nothing but get in the way. It's like, you can make it more exaggerated to see it even more clearly. This is exaggerating, but if you were to ask yourself, let's say every hour you set an alarm, all right, little ding. And whenever the ding went off, you ask, do I want to throw a tantrum, right? But in a sense, on kind of a bit of a smaller scale, that's essentially what people do with themselves, right? When people ask, do I feel like doing, right? Again, do I feel like doing it is as ridiculous as asking, have I already mastered this? When they're asking whether to learn something, but not whether it's efficient to learn. You have, right, mastered something, you're learning something new, and you ask whether you're already going to feel like you're smart. A better way to put it is, am I going to feel like I'm really smart in the sense of already knowing about this topic, what I'm starting to learn, right? That's insane. Test. The answer will always be no, and it'll always make you stop learning. Similarly, if you ask yourself whether you feel like doing something, either explicitly or half implicitly. But I think people ask themselves something like that a lot. And I think related to that question is asking, am I at the point where I think I deserve results now in something related that, or of course you don't phrase it that way, but you imply it, right? And all of that is just a weird nonsense question, similar to setting an alarm and asking, do I want to throw a tantrum? Right? Or even just, do I want to imagine if you just set an alarm and you ask yourself, think of something really tempting. Do I want to go out, get some ice cream right now rather than working? If an alarm went off, asking yourself that every half an hour, every hour, that would obviously just mess with you working. Just sometimes a person in our house will do that, right? And it'll be sometimes frustrating because you don't want someone to come and ask you or tempt you to go do something else when you're trying to be immersed in accomplishing a task. But if you break your immersion, it can be harder to get back in. It can be the kind of thing where you're interested in doing it as long as you're immersed. But realistically, if your immersion gets broken, then the sense of importance of it then gets, okay, the imposed authority, right? Medical with pharma, Western options, legal with police and courts. Yeah, all over the place. Authority, 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 as if it's real. And there's literally there's such a thing as people threatening us for real. And there's such a thing as it being strategically, tactically smart to comply with the threat. But you don't want to believe in, ironically, you get rewarded all over the place for believing in authority, right? Especially in school. And then typically in jobs, you get rewarded for believing in authority. The good thing with a job, at least you're agreeing, right? So that's reasonable in certain cases, as long as it's within the realm of what you agreed to. When they start acting outside that realm, then although if you continue in your job, you're basically agreeing to the new deal, right? They might be screwing with you in the sense of reliance because you invested in that job in a certain way that you've invested resources you wouldn't have, and they're changing the deal when they shouldn't be, then that's an issue, right? But anyway, you do what you have to do. Fate, our feeling that we deserve money after working a certain amount. So true. Wow. Excellent. Yeah, and you see how ridiculous it is, right? Like, it's totally understandable. That's how I guessed it. I felt it myself. I probably could feel it myself in certain ways. Although I think mostly I've integrated it out of my mind, I think. Well, I'm not. But of course, I found that out by looking at myself. But very understandable, but clearly absurd. Suleiman, focus on connecting the damn. That's it. Right. Your webinars are always power packed, but this is next level. Wow. Super great. I told you guys I'd bring it this time with the sledgehammer. So when we age, don't we change? No. If whatever you think that we or I is your self-referential word is referring to, if what you think it's referring to changes, and that must not be what it's referring to, which means that your sense of what words refer to is off. Your whole mental model for how words work and how you think with them is off. And I had to confront that myself and do a lot of work on that. The trouble with me getting into it is worried that it'll get boring. Maybe I'll work on it and work on presenting it and so forth even more specifically. But I give you guys the big picture about it. And I give you guys a number of conclusions based on me not making the same mistake that people make. But yeah, that's why I say who you are, you're not your body or your mind. That's how I figured out I'm not my body or my mind at all. No part of my mind, no part of my body could really be self-referential, could really be who I really am. Anything that can change, and really anything that's even like a source of a lot of things, like in that for the most part. Anything that's like anything that's like a thinking source that comes up with ideas can't be me, because to come up with ideas, you're processing. A thing that processes moves and changes or something. But anyway, I understand myself as being that, like a that's aware of my BEING, but that just means like a thing that can be aware of a conscious field. And then I'm responsible for whatever power I do have, like whatever free will I do have. Then there's a certain responsibility related to that, whatever that might be. There's a certain power or free will I must have, or else everything's meaningless. Specifically, like bad stuff would be meaningless without being coupled with free will. It only has meaning in the context of there being potential for free will, which gives the ability to love, which can give us more good than just if God put us in a state of kind of drug-induced imposed bliss, as I've explained before. Megan Lee, if words could change just a little bit, then hi, David, changed by just one letter to hit David. No, even a little bit. That's pretty funny, Megan. I like that. That's clever. I like just one letter. Exactly. Hit David. Perfect. That's it. But Matt says that entitlement school mentality is clear to me in some ways, but your example of working for 2 years at some point, feeling like you deserve a result has been a dizzle to me and affects me negatively. Yeah, I figured that would hit people because we've all got to have, I know how it is. Right? We're all that way. I mean, a lot of these things I've realized and worked on, these things are obviously so powerfully implied by our culture and context. We're all in a strong current of it being normalized and reinforced also, which makes your training so invaluable. Thank you, Matt. We can build our way out. It seems that by just removing that one entitlement, deserving failure condition, it removes other. Yeah, it's a huge, awesome change in our box. And related to that, I'm already awesome. See, there's this whole cyclical spiral of believing like your mind fabricates your outer boxes, right? And then so you don't feel helpless. So it gives you a sense of certainty and it fabricates a way to know what's true. All of it's a fabrication. It's an approximation. It's flawed. It's incorrect. And then people's whole reality ends up being based upon believing that it is good. Their source of their knowledge and beliefs and actions and thoughts is awesome and good and correct. It's not just that their beliefs are correct or that their core beliefs, it's the source of their core beliefs, their epistemology. And that's exactly where we need to revamp. And then in order to do that, we have the even deeper perspective that we want to let it build, to build it, but let it build. Instead of believing it's already awesome, we want to start with a seed. No matter how small, the important thing about the seed is that it's correct. The seed could be, I'm the being that's aware of my conscious field. Whatever it is I am, I must not be able to change. Anything that does change can't be me, or else I'd be contradicting myself every new time I use the word I. If I kept changing, that means the meaning of I keeps changing, and that means hit David. Things like that. And then just anything that changes is not the same thing, right? A equals A, right? The law of non-contradiction, right? Something and its opposite can't both be true. It doesn't matter if it's satisfying, if it's enough stuff, if it's the thing that you wanted to know, right? People are like, I want to know how to make money, or I want to know if the person I'm in a relationship with, I should stick with. I want to know if they really love me. And you didn't tell me the answer, right? It's not enough. So they go back to their old way of thinking, right? It's not enough fast enough. It didn't in other words, it didn't prove that they were awesome, right, already fast enough. But instead, we want to, everything changes when we respect the seed that we can know. There's few things, and there's these methods, right? Like this sledgehammer, however you characterize it, the law of non-contradiction or the law of identity, something is the same as itself. But I like if it changes, it can't be the same thing. And if it doesn't change relevantly, it is. Or if you have two opposites, one of them has to be true, one of them is true, the other is the opposite. If you can disprove the opposite, then you prove the thing. If you can show that you can't be omniscient, then you know that you're not omniscient, right? All knowing. So when you respect the seed and embrace the idea of growing, building on what you know with other things that you know, and it's okay if it's small, because the value is in the correctness of what you're building rather than that you're already awesome and how much you've built, right? Those are all related, right? If you want a lot of stuff that you know already, right? You want volume and fast. Instead, we go with reliable and easy, right? It's actually easy to think about learning. It's easy to learn with the attitude of I start with somewhere and I start learning, right? I take action. I think, I hear from people, and it's all going to help give me some sort of clarity. Now, hearing from someone else and saying that's now true, I've now learned that is true, that's incorrect. That's associating, right? But people, you can hear from people, they can open your eyes to distinctions. They can give you recipes. Doesn't mean the recipe is correct, but now you have a recipe you didn't have before and you can think about it, try it. It opens up distinctions, context for understanding more, right? More framework. When life becomes about building that strength and flexibility, and you value both strength and flexibility in the right places, then you value identifying what you don't know and what you can't know, what's a gray area, because then you get to be flexible in it. So love it. It's a failure condition to believe that you deserve it. Yeah, that was a nice takeaway, right? Nice practical takeaway for making money. I try to have those mixed in rather than just rant. Keon, I had an example come to mind with this. It's like software developers who jump into a startup and they build something. But then when it's time to divvy up the equity before after doing work, they each felt like they deserve more because they did more. At that point, they don't want to be involved anymore. People have to come up with all sorts of ways to deal with it, but they haven't used LOI technique. Oh, and by the way, I used LOI technique, and Greg and Mike were awesome with it. We're great with totally, we're on board with it. But I said, well, here's how I characterized it with OMG, but I was proactive about this. Big deal. I saw it coming. But I said, we're all, Greg, Mike, and myself. I'm just talking about the early founding of OMG for now, in a vacuum, not counting later one way or the other. That we are all doing more than we hope. Not that we would do more, but that we just obviously were doing more or more valuable. Our contribution was more valuable than we really could hope for from any of us. And so we were over the threshold that we don't compare. And also that it's so impossible for me to judge how much work Greg is supposed to do, the value. It's just necessary and awesome and was so much past what I hoped for. Third partner, right? And we had Mike and myself who could launch something, but we really wanted someone that could take it home with a teaching that was really going to be what people needed. And that was Greg of SEO and attitude. Obviously, Greg, right? He's just amazing with his lack of intimidation and fear and his kind. Everything about his integrity is huge. And then he felt similarly with us in terms of what we contributed. So when it wasn't about looking over the person and saying, are they working today as much as I am? Right. It's just everyone's clearly so far over the threshold. We stop measuring or worrying what amount. And of course, we just divide things equally in thirds. And that worked well too. It was more complicated adding some more partners because they weren't founding members, but we made it work quite well. Joseph said, this is really helping everything tie together. Yeah, there's a way this all ties together pretty well in my head. But I'm pretty happy with how it's coming out. Of course, a lot of it, I talk in the moment a bit of free association, but there's a framework to it that I'm well aware of. And I do like how it's coming together pretty well. Really, and I think I'm addressing a number of the kind of confusions, the blocks and objections and so forth that have come out of my previous teaching. Even just that one, the other car kind of illustration where I think people were confused and thought that like what they wanted, what I thought I was telling people is that they should always be thinking about fixing their thought. But I illustrated last time about the point of fixing and maintaining a car so it runs well is to run it, right? Like, I want you to live your life in flow, thinking inside the box, so to speak. We step back when necessary, and then we totally try to look at there's this two things I talked about last time, right? You can step back, and that's correct sometimes. And then sometimes it's not even a matter of stepping back because you have nowhere to step onto. You're examining your most basic frames or the basic meanings of your of words that you have that are part of your assumption, right? For thinking about your you have meanings of the word money or work, right? That kind of involve the idea of deserve without you realizing it, right? That sort of stuff you can't really spot necessarily by stepping back. Of course, in your case, you could listen to me and I'll help point it out. But how do I get to it is by doing what I talked about, where I use the sledgehammer. It's painstaking. It takes me hours and years, in a sense, of just saying that can't be right. And then that opens up a space, and then something else comes in and I examine it and think about it, right? And I try to talk about that process. The problem is it takes so long that it's so hard to talk about the benefit of it. So I get tangled up. And what do I do to tell you how to initiate a process of spending the next few decades working on this stuff? In essence, a lot of you want to do that, and I appreciate that, and you should. And I've given you the basics of how to do that, but there's a way I know I often really don't get too much in the weeds. Maybe I'll intentionally get in the weeds at some point and give you guys warning. And I think it's still a lot of you would want to hear that anyway. But intuitively, it's tough, feeling, so forth. But I think I'll look to get to it as best I can. Let's see here. But Joseph said, yeah, this is really helping everything tie together, really dissolving the overwhelm that I haven't finished all the alchemy and crushing the game and rigging the game yet. Over time, I do a lot of webinars. They add up, right? There's weeks or months between them, but still, when you look at it's a lot of hours of webinars. And the way Mike listened to them 5 times. Millionaire is the new middle class, according to Grant Cardone, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Takes an average of 1.1 million of survey respondents to be financially comfortable. But how many are actually worth 1 million? And yeah, and this is relevant and helpful. I very much appreciate it. And it helps give me some additional thoughts, some of which I'll point out an issue I have. But we don't need to think in terms of class. Class is a fabrication that's mainly used to reinforce tyranny and to divide people and split them up. Mike, of course, has no interest in tyranny dividing anyone at all. Of course, he thinks totally the opposite of that. But I'm pointing that out. And then something, anyway. But it's not so much. This is a nice way to reinforce the feelings. Again, I totally like this post. But it doesn't really matter what's normal. And I did refer to it in terms of a lot of people achieve it. And that's just a way of pointing out that it is useful to look and see. Look for the reason I pointed out about it being fairly normal to hit 1 million. Main thing is it's necessary. The reason I pointed out it's normal, there's one useful thing, which is it's helpful to have, at some point we have to eyeball a sense of, is our box working? And so if a lot of people are achieving something and we're not, then just eyeballing it, there's some issue somewhere with our boxes, right? It's not entirely necessary for me to say that. It was more to help your feelings along. But ultimately what it comes down to is reveal the real thing to latch on to, regardless of that, is latch on to reveal what you need and do what it takes for what you need, right? What you need means that which is going to have the most impact on your life. If something else is going to have more positive impact on your life than making a certain amount of money, then that other things are prayer. And so whatever it takes to hit over 10 million Americans, there you go, are millionaires. It's a very achievable thing. This mentally integrated concept, Joshua Fletch, right? This mentally integrated concept is one of the big breakthroughs or tumblers in the law. Yeah, I thought it would be, but as LOI has unfolded, I've noticed more and more of this type of thing where I knew one thing intellectually and still noticed myself doing otherwise. Exactly. I know a lot of you are dealing with that and you're wondering how, and it makes you feel like maybe I'm failing to apply LOI or something's going wrong, but perhaps nothing's going. Perhaps what's going wrong is thinking that you're supposed to start out already being awesome, already having things integrated. Or again, what you do want to watch out for is that sense of maybe my feelings are telling me something. Your feelings are just telling you what your mind is associating. Now, that might mean that sometimes your senses pick up stuff, right, in the environment. If you're a rabbit, then your senses might pick up the scent of a predator before you, I'm not saying rabbits are conscious or not, but just to say it whimsically for a moment, before you consciously realize that there's a predator, right? So your mind can integrate feelings from senses and so forth, or memories, other things. It's not a wisdom, but it's coming from somewhere. But it's the kind of thing you can pay attention to if you feel a sense of physical danger or anything. You can pay attention to it and think about it. But at the point where you know one thing is correct, right? If you're working on a project and it gets deleted and you have to redo it, then you're feeling like you don't feel like redoing it. It's clearly incorrect. You don't have to wonder whether there's some sense of wisdom. You can know there isn't, since you look at the situation, you have to do the project. So your feelings are just wrong. And if your feelings are that way, it also means there's something wrong with some outer boxes somewhere. And then you look for it. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. You're not your outer boxes, right? If you feel like there's something wrong with you, it's more about I'm already awesome. Very terrible, but normal outer box that messes people up, right? It leads to all the other problems. Of course, there's something wrong with your outer boxes if you're ever feeling any kind of upset, if everything's not totally integrated yet. What you want to do is figure it out. And then you feel happy when you figure out every new thing. Indications that you're not already perfect are useful if they help you figure something out, or irrelevant. That's it. They're not like something to get upset about. Of course you're not. You're out of the box, not right. Suleiman, this is my 2-year-old certainly thinks she's wise. Yeah, you can see it though in kids, and then it never changes. It just gets added to, and yeah, we just build stuff on top of our 1-year-old and self, literally in our mind and in our mental model. It gets built on what's there and tweaked, and that's how our brain does. So yeah, and never people like there's adults are just like my son, right? Like a young child with stuff memorized on top of it, how they're supposed to and appear. And it's obvious. It's easy to see when you look for it. Julie says, wow, what a webby, writer's cramp and sore head. David's on fire. And we'll bring it to a close here. Dave says low. I think low. LOI, maybe LOI. I can't. That's the trouble with a freaking LOI is I didn't see how a stupid I and the L. So thank you, David, for bringing great ruthlessness to the table today. It must be LOL, right? Yeah, ditto. You're welcome. Welcome with the ruthlessness. And I still censor my ruthlessness. It's stuff I don't say. Suleiman says, David, love the energy today. Can you please give more examples of people violate the sledgehammer? Yeah, I'll work on basically expanding on this next week, and we'll see where that goes. Not going to Tuesday next week. Look for maybe Wednesday of next week. Julie says, it's been amazing to reflect this last week on just how much of what I imply is important because I work on it every day and think about it constantly. I also imply is not important because I have such vagueness around it. Yeah. And when people schedule vacations, I'm not saying do or don't schedule vacations. I'm pointing out implications. Implications are implications. Regardless of what you end up doing, the implication is true, right? It doesn't mean you should or shouldn't do whatever it is, but the implication is. So when you schedule a vacation, then you're saying that like during this period of time, the goal that you like have now is not important, which can be like this arbitrary implication that your goal is like not important, like that you can wave a magic wand and make your goal no longer the thing that's going to help you. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all gone. And here's what I mean. Here's a way to help practically apply what I'm saying about vacation. Sometimes there's going to be goals, which means like a threshold or a target that reveals itself to you, not through revelation from your 1-year-old wise self, but through thinking accurately, right? And checking it over in different ways, as I've shown you in the past. So a goal reveals itself. You're working on it. Sometimes it's of the nature where taking a vacation is not going to be the implication you're going to want. It's going to be open-ended and you're really going to want to solve it. And you're not going to want something to just hop in and interfere with that and imply the wrong thing and take you out of immersion. And it could be just knowing that, like having a person scheduled to interrupt you, right? In kind of a way that's arbitrary relative to your task. It might not be arbitrary in the sense that it might have a reason, like at 6 p.m. might be a reason or whatever. But if it's arbitrary timing regarding where you're going to be with your task that you're working on, like maybe instead, when possible, you might want to have the people in your life where you tell them when you're done with your immersion and then you look to do stuff together at that point. And especially when you're trying to break Baru, like when you're trying to get practically speaking, when you're trying to get escape velocity regarding something, like you're working on something, like making money, this comes up, right? And it's not happening by default. And you've got to get escape velocity. You got to do something a little bit different. You got to get more immersed. You got to get more momentum in the sense of immersion and implication of priority and all that. And you really don't want to undercut it. Like you, in a sense, the vectors, right? The tailwind, whatever, the vectors that you've been running with are not enough because you're not breaking through and you need more. That's when you don't schedule vacation, ideally. You see what I'm saying? And anything metaphorical to that. You don't schedule interruptions. You try to do as much as you can to not have things that arbitrarily interrupt you and break immersion because you need more escape velocity. So don't, at that point, you're looking to add momentum, add vectors to your escape velocity, not subtract. And every time you subtract, you're going to need to add even more. But you're like just on the edge like of having enough and you're trying to find ways to add more momentum. And if you already don't quite have enough, do you really want to undercut yourself with what the implication of vacation might think? Maybe I'll burn out. What the hell is that? Again, it's like all these just, I deserve, what do I feel like doing? Is the goal revealed or not? You burn out because something's arbitrary, because you're trying to project black and white onto gray. And then your other feelings can, like on the same playing field as that and compete. You don't burn out when you have to do, right? If your kid is sick or bleeding, you don't burn out halfway to the hospital. So if you know that you need something, if it's revealed in a clear way, again, I don't mean revealed like revelation, I mean through clear thinking, right? Burnout isn't really relevant. You get immersed and you break through and you try to add momentum, roughly speaking, right? And get it. And don't put the opposite in your path. That's the thing. And then when you're not having to break through, that's when you can do vacation stuff. Because when you're not having to break through, then if someone's in a job or somehow has a entrepreneurial situation where they don't need a breakthrough at the moment, then your current vectors and momentum, whatever. I'm using that word a little bit vaguely right now, but sorry, the common meaning is good enough for my whole point right now. It's within the target. So you have enough momentum, it's all going okay. Then you might be able to put something that's against the momentum and it's still okay. Because we do have a life and so forth, but not when you're trying to break through. And if someone has a job, they can tend to schedule vacation and so forth. There's not really any break, right? They're just like a slog, like they're just all a little bit nonsensical ultimately. If the only thing someone has is a job is my point. Typically, it's not going to get them to where they need to get to with money. The reason someone can have a job, but also have a plan to hit their target with money. If my point is a job is definitely not going to help you, let you hit your target, then that shouldn't be all you're doing it, right? If you target it, you obviously don't do a plan that definitely is not going to hit your target. It's revealed. Anyway, so some food for thought. Also, as a practical matter, if you're scheduling vacations, you're implying that something's not a priority, and if you have partners, then that's going to multiply. So keep that in. I've been subconsciously trying to avoid burnout. This is called excellent. Exactly. The way to avoid burnout is right. Again, just tell yourself, I wouldn't burn out no matter how far you had to drive. If your kid's bleeding, like in badly, or whatever you had to do, you do it. Right. And it's not really an issue. So same thing with achieving something. When you realize the target you're trying to hit for real, like you realize it clearly, then again, like the way you'll approach it will naturally flow from that with these. And these outer boxes you'll see, you're intelligent enough that when we get the outer boxes set, you figure out how to maneuver inside them cleverly inside the box. So it'll be fairly obvious. Wow, so helpful to understand that after finding clarity, not feeling like doing something is just a random incorrect thing. Yeah, that right. That if you don't feel like doing something right, it's such a block when you feel like it's coming from some wise source. Wowzer, such a great webinar, says John Victoria. What are other practices that we can do or eliminate to help our mind further integrate? Great question. Maybe I'll use that as a bit of a springboard for some next time stuff. I'll end this webinar now and then I'll go through these. Wow, great discussion too today. Okay, so I'll take a look at this for real and look to help it drive us forward for next time, which I think will be on next Wednesday at 7. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your participation and glad that this webinar went over so well. And I will see you guys next week. Take care, guys.